The bell over the diner door sounded like a tin laugh when it opened, and the wind that followed had teeth. Grease drifted from the kitchen like warm fog. The coffee smelled burnt in the familiar way that makes you forgive it. It was late enough that the waitress called everyone hun, and meant it less each time. I'd come for pie and quiet after a shift that sanded me down to bones. Claims adjuster by day, liar by necessity. My shirt still held the damp of lake wind. My fingers were ink-smudged from notes I pretended would matter. I slid into the back booth with its cracked red vinyl and stared at my reflection in the dark window. The glass made me look like someone you might trust if you hadn't tried already. The homeless guy sat 3 stools down at the counter, a bundle of canvas and winter, beard frosted white at the edges. He cupped his hands around a chipped mug like it might bolt. A group of guys from the Tommy's Body and Paint shop, still in work shirts, had decided he was a sporting event. They tossed words like coins they didn't want back. "Where'd you park your mansion, Santa? You paying in invisible money?" The room absorbed the laughter with the resignation of old linoleum. I watched because I've always been the kind of coward who calls it observing. I told myself I'd say something when the waitress handled it badly, when the manager didn't appear, when my conscience finally got louder than the radio. But the homeless man didn't flinch. He simply turned his head and looked out the window at nothing the rest of us could see. His hands were big and careful, the kind of hands that know how to keep things from falling. Then he slid something from the inside of his coat, an old Ziploc gone cloudy, and pressed it to the counter. The overhead light made the plastic shine like oil. Inside, a photograph, a glossy 4x6 that looked new in a way that didn't belong to him. He tapped it once with a knuckle the size of a walnut, and the sound made the room turn its head. "Look," he said, voice gravel and smoke. "Look, real." The shop guys leaned in, grins already loaded. The waitress slowed, coffee pot hovering. I saw it from my angle first, a slant through plastic glare. The 3 men at the counter, same shirts, same faces, only cleaner and younger, standing in front of a house I recognized without wanting to. And me, off to the side, blurry, but confirmed by the scar on my chin from a bicycle accident 14 years ago. The date scrawled on the border in Sharpie, July 17. The man's finger held the photograph like it might fly. "You were all there," he said, looking at the 3 and then at me. "You too. You left." His eyes were green under streetlight yellow. "I brought it back." Nobody laughed. My fork slid in my hand. The bell over the diner door sounded like a tin laugh when it opened. Outside, a train moaned the kind of long note that sounds like a dare. How did a man I'd never met carry a picture of a night I'd spent a decade pretending I couldn't see? My name is Ethan Vale, 34. During daylight, I evaluate accidents for a company that says, "We stand by you," in font sizes that feel like an apology. By night, I go home to a rented second-floor flat above a barber who keeps late hours and loud opinions. My routine is tea I never finish, runs I pretend will change me, and spreadsheets that do not. My lungs hold the smell of printer toner and the old wood of my building. My knuckles remember typing more than touching. Relationships? A pile of almosts, and one I shouldn't have let go. Mara, journalist, laugh like a struck match, eyes that found the center of things with surgical accuracy. We were together 4 years, apart for 2, still orbiting the same bars and grocery aisles in a city small enough to make you think fate is just laziness. She said I was a man who set a glass down gently so it wouldn't argue with the table. I said she didn't know how to walk away from a story, even when it slashed back. Both of us were right and tired. Every week on Tuesdays, I visited my dad in Grafton Correctional, an hour west, a habit that had stopped hurting and started calcifying. He'd taken a plea on a robbery he swore with a misunderstanding 15 years ago. I believed him enough to go, not enough to forgive. The visiting room smelled like pine sol and old hopes. We played cards we didn't need and talked about weather we couldn't change. I told him about Mara like she wasn't gone. He told me he'd be out next spring if the board believed his new heart medicine made him safe. We both practiced lying on each other's behalf. There was also Noah. Noah Pierce, from the block, skinny then and loud now, owner of the auto shop where the counter crew laughed too easily. He and I had shared a vandalized picnic table and a dozen afternoons pretending corners were kingdoms. As adults, we share a history we don't look at in normal light. Because of July 17, 13 summers ago, under a heat dome that made the lake smell like pennies and dead fish. It's a date my body knows the way you know a stove is hot by the air above it. There was a house on Brecksville Road, newly empty, divorce sale cheap, rumored to hide cash for the ex who fled. Noah had a plan with too many moving parts and not enough breaks. 3 of us went. Noah, his friend Jace, who always brought a laugh you paid for later, and me. I carried a flashlight and the stupid belief that if I said we'd just look, the universe would notarize it. We went at twilight. The house smelled like hot plaster and dog hair. I found a photo in a silver frame of a woman standing with a kid by a backyard maple, faces blurred by angle, skin pale as flash. I set it back carefully because that's who I am, even trespassing. Then voices outside, not ours. A fourth, Bart, the neighbor you don't notice until he notices you. What happened next went wrong in pieces. There was a shout, a shove, a fall down 2 unfinished steps, Jace's arm banging the banister, Noah swearing it was all fine. But the neighbor saw our plates. He called. We scattered. Nothing happened publicly, no sirens, no cuffs, but pieces of that night kept showing up in the margins of things, like a watermark under all my jobs. A week later, I noticed a missing envelope from the table, cash that hadn't been ours, just there and then not. I never took it. I told myself I didn't see who did. Noah bought new tools and said business was looking up. I convinced myself it wasn't a crime if the house belonged to no one. Then I watched Mara investigate another story, housing court corruption, receipts that didn't match, and I recognized the feeling on the faces of the people she interviewed, that tightness at the edges of the mouth, the discipline it takes not to confess because you're so tired of the weight. I found the frame again in my mind and tried not to wonder if a kid looked at that backyard and asked what happens to a tree when nobody names it. I didn't see the homeless man before tonight because grief makes you farsighted and guilt makes you blind. But I knew, the second the photo's flash caught the diner's fluorescent light, that the past had hired a courier. If the picture proves a story I survived by not telling, what happens when it starts talking for me?
"Where'd you get that?" Noah asked, too casual, knuckles going white on his coffee cup. Up close, the shop shirt embroidered with Noah looked like a dare to pronounce his innocence correctly. Jace pretended to stretch, cracked his neck like punctuation. The homeless man, coat too big, scarf too thin, peeled the plastic open with care. He slid the photo out using 2 fingers like tweezers. Even through grease fog and neon glare, I could see the detail. The sagging porch, the box fan in the upstairs window, Jace with his hat backward and stupid confidence forward, Noah at the curb pretending he belonged on any street, and me, the version of myself too young for this confession, half in the frame, carrying the flashlight like it could make us righteous. The waitress, Darla, set the pot down and wiped her hands on her apron the way people do when they need both to be free. "Fellas," she said finally, "maybe leave him alone." Noah laughed, but it sounded like something falling. "We're buying him a coffee," he said. "See, we're philanthropists." The man turned the photo over. Jewel 17, House, written in block letters. He tapped the caption like a judge tapping a bench. "You remember?" he asked, and his breath smelled like wintergreen and the damp of long walks. He looked at me. "You left at the corner when the dog barked. You said you'd come back and didn't." I opened my mouth and found the word no sitting there, but it tasted like dust. "How much?" Jace asked, smile parked crooked. "You want a reward for your scrapbook?" The man shook his head like he was shaking water out of his ears. "Not money," he said. "A hearing." He lifted another bag from his coat, the kind you put a sandwich in if you still believed in lunch, and set it beside the photo. Inside was a second picture, the neighbor, Bart, standing in his yard, one hand raised in a blurred wave, a child's bike helmet on the grass like a dropped planet. The date on that one read, June 16. "Buddy," Noah said, soft warning, eyes narrowing, "if you're trying to make friends, there are easier ways." The man looked at the clock above the pie display. "There's time to do right," he said, and the words landed in my ribs. He turned to me, not to the others. "Your name's Ethan. Your father's in Grafton. You run the mornings in the park near the church with the blue doors. You don't sleep good." The room went even quieter than it had. The bell over the door chimed for no one. My throat tasted like copper and old coffee. I didn't ask how he knew. I wanted to be brave enough to ask why. He slid a napkin toward me. The handwriting was tidy, in the way of people who learned it when teachers still carried rulers. "Tomorrow, noon, Lakeview Cemetery, near the Angel." Underneath, H. "The Angel?" Darla repeated, forcing cheer. "Are you a tour guide?" The man picked up the photo and slid it back into the clouded bag with that same careful two-fingered motion. "You'll come," he said to me. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a plea. It sounded like a promise he could already keep. Noah's knee bounced like a metronome. "He's a con," he told me, like we were teammates and the play was obvious. "He's fishing." "For what?" I asked, surprised to hear my voice steady. "Attention, or your wallet, or religion." The man stood, a rustle of canvas and the whisper of something metallic, keys or ring, deep in his coat. He placed $2 bills under his cup and folded his fingers around the napkin as if handing it back would make this night normal. Then he nodded to Darla, a small courtly bow that didn't match the fray of him, and left. The bell over the door laughed again. The cold came in after him like gossip. "He's got your number," Noah said to me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder that made me want to shrug my skin off. I slid the napkin into my jacket pocket anyway. It felt heavier than paper. The coffee was suddenly too bitter, the pie too sweet, the chrome too reflective. My fingers smelled like lemon from the wipe I used on the fork, and I couldn't stop thinking of the silver picture frame in the house on Brecksville and the blank space where a simple apology should live. "Tomorrow?" Darla asked quietly as she refilled my coffee, the steam fogging her glasses. "I don't know," I said, which was only half a lie. If a man with nothing can carry a past this heavy, what's my excuse? The cemetery smelled like wet stone and cold iron. Lake wind threaded the trees, lifting the last brown leaves like tired hands. The Hayseret Angel, winged bronze and weeping vertigrous tears, sat at her post as if she'd just closed her eyes for a blink that took a century. I arrived early because guilt makes me punctual. I wore the jacket Mara once said made me look like someone who could be trusted in bad weather. My palms felt slick in the cold. Somewhere a groundskeeper's leaf blower buzzed like a distant argument. Closer, a crow scolded the morning. He came from the east side path, the canvas bundle of him moving like a boat with a limp. He looked less homeless here, under the Angel in the big sky, than he had in Meon. He looked like a man reframed. He sat on the bench without asking, and didn't meet my eyes. "H," he said when I asked, and then, as if embarrassed by pretension, Harold. I took the napkin out and set it between us like a treaty. "Why me?" I asked. He picked at the edge of his glove. "You're the only one who flinched at the truth," he said. "The others flinched at me." "What do you want?" I asked. My breath hung in the air and made punctuation marks. "Names," he said. "Rooms where they listen. A place for a picture to live where it does some good." He slid a third photograph from his coat, the plastic new and the photo not. It was a close-up this time, the Brecksville house number, and a scrap of a note taped to the inside window. "Be kind to yourself. L." The handwriting made something in my chest stumble. "L?" I asked. "Lydia, the wife," he said. "She left a note for him when she left the house. He put it in the window to remind himself. He likes the kind of reminders that hurt." "You talk like you know them," I said. He didn't answer the way I expected. "Your father's parole hearing is in March," he said instead, the way a doctor tells you a test result. You'll drive out 2 times next month. You'll think about not speaking. You will speak. You'll say he taught you not to lie, and that will almost be true. My stomach went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. "Are you crazy?" he offered, not offended. "No, I'm just old enough to have seen a lot of the same story. I collect proof when I can. I keep it safe." He patted his coat. It made the faint sound of paper and plastic, and the small clinks that might be keys or dog tags. "Why the house? Why now?" "Because the man who lived there, Bart, got sick last winter. He used to walk the block. He used to tell the versions of the same night to anyone who'd listen. First it was 3 boys, then 2, then a blur. He wanted his neighbor to forgive him for not stopping you. He wanted himself to forgive for not stopping himself." Harold's eyes moved over the angel's face. "He died last week. No one came for the pictures he saved in a kitchen drawer. I did, because I check places like that for parts of the world people forget." "How did you know my name, my father, the park?" "It's not a magic trick. You're a man who believes in loops. You take the same one every morning." He shrugged. "And your name's on your mailbox, and on your runner's bib from that charity 10K you never took off your bag." I almost laughed, and the almost hurt. "You could sell this stuff." He said he tried. He said he tried. Nobody pays for the truth when they can rent the lie cheaper. What do you want me to do? He folded the napkin once, then again, then tucked it in his pocket like it mattered. Tell someone who knows what to do with it, not the cops who like paperwork, the writer, the one with the match laugh. Mara, I said, the name landing like a coin on a counter. He nodded once, not looking at me, as if he'd saved me the embarrassment of pretending he didn't know. Bring her here at dusk. People say too much in the dark. I'll show you more. And Ethan. He finally met my eyes. They were very green and very tired. Don't come with the men who think they're still boys. They'll break what we need. Behind us, the angel kept crying her green tears. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a work email that wanted to make me small. I put it away like a cigarette I no longer allowed. When I turned back, Harold was rising with the slow carefulness of men who carry weight in their knees. He nodded to the angel like you nod to a bouncer you're on good terms with, and left. The bench felt warm where he'd been a second ago. My fingers smelled like cold iron from the armrest. I looked at the numbers on the photograph and at the word kind and read it like a dare. If Harold had the proof and I had the people, what else would the night bring to the table we'd just set?
Mara came because curiosity is her religion. She wore a blue scarf that matched the evening, and her notebook already had my name on a page. She smelled like clean wool and cheap coffee. We sat on the bench beneath the angel, and she tapped her pen against her thigh, the way she does when she's trying not to scare a story into hiding. "You're sure this isn't a stunt?" she asked, half grin softening the edge. "I'm sure of nothing," I said, which felt more honest than I liked. Harold appeared without the bell of a door to announce him, just the soft scuff of boots on damp path. He carried a small canvas messenger bag that had seen wars, even if he hadn't. He nodded at Mara with courtly precision that made her eyebrows lift. "Writer," he said, with a tiny smile. "Good." He laid out his proof on the bench like a magician unrolling a routine he didn't want to admit he loved. More prints, some new, some old, a couple of notes on yellow legal paper with tidy block letters, June 15 and June 17, and one labeled AUG 3, Return, that made the hair on my arm stir. "Return?" I asked. Harold tapped the last photo with one thick finger. It showed the Brecksville house porch with a small gift bag on the step, navy with silver tissue. The note on top, written in a different hand, said, "For Lydia, sorry." The date was weeks after our visit. "Somebody came back," he said. "Guilt is a homing pigeon." Mara leaned in, breath fogging the glossy surface. "Did they open it?" she asked. Harold shrugged. "Don't know. Bart told me this while his breath still worked.
He said he saw a skinny man with a ball cap leave the bag and run like the night was closing. "Jace," I said without meaning to. Mara looked at me sideways. "You and I are going to have a long walk after this," she said, not unkind. "There's more," Harold said. He pulled a thin plastic sleeve from his coat, the kind archivists use when they're pretending time will not eat everything. Inside was a driver's license, the corner sun-bleached, the photo of a woman with set jaw and eyes that looked like they'd ended arguments. Lydia Salter. "Found in a thrift store drop box with a stack of expired cards," Harold said. "They sell them as novelty. It isn't funny." Mara took a photo with her phone. The sound was small, but felt loud under the trees. "We can find her," she said, "if she wants to be found." "Start with the name on the electric at the time," Harold said. "I wrote it there." He'd printed the utility account number in his tidy hand. "I know a city clerk who remembers favors." "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked him finally, the question galloping out of me. "You could set a fire and watch it for warmth. You could sell what you have. You could—" He cut me off with a kindness that felt like a slap. "Because somebody used to call me Dad, and I wasn't good at that." He shifted, and his coat made that soft sound again of small metals. "This doesn't fix that, but it feels like pointing north." Mara's pen stopped. The wind sighed through the trees like a long thought. A siren somewhere chose another street. The angel didn't move. From behind us, gravel crunched. Noah stepped into the clearing with Jace a half step behind, both smelling of cold and the sharp citrus of shop hand cleaner. "Good evening," Noah said with a smile he'd learned in mirror light. "Thought we'd join the book club." Mara snapped her notebook shut. "You were not invited," she said, and somehow it sounded like law. Jace angled his chin at Harold. "You the librarian?" Harold gathered the papers in a movement that was slow and not scared. "I'm the janitor," he said. "I keep what other people throw away." He tucked the sleeve with the license inside his coat. "Meeting's over." Noah's smile didn't change. He looked at me. "You really want to do this?" he asked softly. "You really want to unbury a bone and let something gnaw at it?" I thought about the Brecksville porch and the gift bag and the word sorry written by a hand that probably shook. I thought about my father and parole and a lifetime of practicing the wrong sentences. "Yes," I said. Jace's laugh had no joy. "Careful, Vale. People who go looking for truth come home with different names." If the past was a door we'd pried open, who was about to step through it first?
Mara turned proof into phone calls the way alchemists turned base metal into myth. She smelled like almond lotion and newsroom dust when she was working, and she carried a tension you could strum. We made a list: Lydia Salter, Bart's brother, the city clerk, a retired detective, Mally Allen, who now managed security at a museum, and still knew what to ask. Every name was a pressure point. We found Lydia by utility history first, then by a P.O. box, then by a forwarding request sent to a laundromat in Parma, where the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. The attendant there, silver hair, sleeves tattooed with flowers that looked like they could argue for themselves, took one look at Harold's tired eyes and nodded toward the back. "She leaves envelopes on Tuesdays," she said. "Watches till they're picked up." The envelope was there, navy like the gift bag from the photo, the handwriting neat and practiced. Inside, money orders, small, regular. A note, "For Bart, mortgage help if you'll accept it, L." And there, soft as a bruise, a line in pencil: "I forgive you for not knocking. Please forgive me for everything else." Mara exhaled like a balloon letting itself land. "Grief writes better than love," she said, then looked ashamed of being right. We reached Bart's brother, Stan, in a house that smelled like reheated soup and nice attempts. He cried without apology when we said Harold's name, hugged him like penance, and told us that after Bart died, he'd found a receipt for a safe deposit box at Third Lake Savings. He said he was keeping something for a day when the right person asked, Stan said, voice wrecked. Nobody asked. Third Lake Savings had walls the color of oatmeal, and policies the texture of it too. Mara used 4 phone calls, 2 old favors, and 1 threat dressed like a joke to open the box Monday noon. Inside, another stack of photos, a flash drive, and a folded page torn from a spiral notebook with a drink ring in the corner. "If the boys from that night come, give them this," it read. "Especially the careful one." My name was underlined after careful, like a sin confessed. On the flash drive, video of the porch on August 3. Base cap, skinny shoulders, Jace, placing the bag, glancing left and right, then sprinting off with the sprint of men who want to run backward in time. The video was shot from a window across the street. Bart had been the chronicler he said he was. In the background, a dog barked the exact bark I still hear when I'm not invited to sleep. Detective Allen watched the clip on Mara's laptop, her hair cropped shorter than when she wore a badge, her eyes the same tool. "That's not robbery," she said. "That's penance. But penance does not erase what came before." "What did come before?" Mara asked. She looked at me, not unkind. She said, "The neighbor filed a report that night. It went nowhere because the house was mid-divorce, ownership muddy as a river. But a file exists, a sticky little ghost." She tapped the screen. "You could report this now, or you could finish the story the way the man in your diner started it, by asking the woman with her name on the envelope what forgiveness costs." We found Lydia in a St. Clair walk-up that smelled of garlic and laundry steam. She opened the door with the chain on, eyes the color of winter sky. She worked nights stocking shelves and days training herself to forget. When she saw Harold, she dropped her gaze and whispered, "I knew you'd find me." Harold stood straighter than he had in the cemetery. "He don't haunt, he tidies." She let us in and made tea like she had learned it from a pamphlet. She held her mug like a story she might spill. "On July 17th, I took my kid to my mother's. The house felt wrong and I didn't want him under wrong ceilings. When I came back, the porch was crooked and the fan was still going." She looked at me. "You didn't break anything on purpose. You said sorry like you hadn't practiced it enough. The skinny one took the envelope. I saw him and he saw me, and he wore that look men wear when they hate their fathers." "Did you file a report?" Mara asked. "I called a number and a woman said a man would come. Then my lawyer said to stop because every hour with that house cost me a month of something else. So I folded up that day and put it in a drawer. When the bag came in August, I threw it away. I only kept this." She crossed to a bookshelf and took down the silver frame I remembered. The woman and the child, a summer day pretending it would last. I kept it because I wanted to know that once there was a porch that wasn't a crime scene. "I'm sorry," I said, and I had finally practiced it enough. She nodded like we'd checked a box. "Tell the skinny one to stop sending money orders. My life is not a jar he gets to fill to feel better." Outside, Mara walked fast, like news on 2 legs. "We have a story," she said, "but it's not the one any of us thought it was. It's about a neighbor who chronicled when no one listened. A woman who refused to turn herself into evidence. A man who keeps pictures like prayers, and," she looked at me, "and it's about you." "I don't," I said, automatically, the defense I sleep with. "Mara," she said, gentler, "it's about what you do now." That night my phone lit with Noah. He texted, "We should talk." Then, "Not on paper." Then, a pin to a parking lot behind the auto shop. I smelled trouble before the air had a chance. What do you bring to a meeting with the past besides open hands and bad sleep?
The lot smelled like motor oil and cooled metal, the sky low and bruised. The shop's fluorescent hum bled through the cinder block like a nagging thought. Noah waited with Jace, both coats unzipped like bravado. A portable speaker played a country song about forgiveness that didn't know the half of it. Noah didn't waste the pretense of small talk. "You're making this worse," he said. "Mara's gonna pour gas on it. She knows how." "She knows how to tell the truth with facts," I said. My breath smoked. Jay stepped forward, nostrils flared. You're going to paint us as villains?" he asked. "You, the kid who left first?" "I left because I was scared, which doesn't make me innocent. It makes me a coward. There's a difference." Noah glanced toward the street, hand twitching like he was swatting a fly only he could see. "You saw the bag. You know we tried to put it back." "You took it first," I said. "You don't get a parade for sweeping your own glass." The speaker skipped. The song hiccuped. "I've got a kid now," Jay said suddenly, voice small around the edges. "You put my name in the paper, he Googles me and sees thief instead of dad." I thought of the silver frame and Lydia's jaw. Teach him the difference by showing him how a man owns what he did, not by hoping the internet forgets. Noah's smile returned, brittle. "And you?" he asked. "How do you own it, Vale? By letting the homeless guy make your itinerary? By walking the truth where it belongs? By showing up? You always were the careful one, the word a soft sneer. Careful men still drown." "I know. I watched it happen." The lot held its breath. Somewhere, a train laid its long, low note across the night like a ruler. "Go to hell," Jay said finally, and the hurt in it was older than both of us. He spat, missed my shoe by an inch, and walked off. Noah watched him leave, then looked back at me with a face I recognized from the teenage version, the one he wore when he was about to choose the fun pain over the useful one. "Last chance. Leave Harold to his ghosts. Let the past rot in peace." "No," I said, and felt the click of choosing like a bone setting right. He nodded once, mock sad. "Then don't say I didn't warn you when the pictures come with prices." If choices are knives, this was the one I finally decided to hold by the handle. Who would bleed first?
Mara's piece went live at 8:01 a.m., The Man Who Saved the Stories Everyone Wanted to Forget. It led with Harold and Bart, with the envelope and the bag, with Lydia's choice and mine. Names were redacted beyond first letters for now. The comments were a night forest, eyes everywhere, opinions that sounded like breathing. Noah sent a text at 8:14. "You've signed our names in invisible ink. It still shows up under the right light." At 10:30, the diner phone rang for Darla and didn't stop. She told me later the city has an appetite for repentance the way it has one for pie. Big at first, then a stomach ache. People came in just to sit on the stool where Harold had been. They left napkins with apologies to no one in particular. The bell over the door got tired of its own job. At noon, Harold didn't show up at the cemetery. I waited under the angel until my fingers forgot they belonged to me. The wind smelled like snow deciding. At 1, I got a text from a number saved only as H. Diner. It felt like a summons and a goodbye. He sat in my booth like he had been assigned it at birth. He looked smaller. He smelled faintly of antiseptic and wool. He nodded at my coffee like it was a language he'd chosen not to learn. "Good work," he said. "You made them listen." "Where were you?" I asked. "Looking for the last piece," he said, and set a folded paper on the table. The crease was precise enough to serve drinks on. I unfolded it. A bank slip from Third Lake, the same bank as the deposit box, showing a withdrawal 10 years ago by Lydia for an amount that matched the rumor we'd all heard about the divorce stash. On the back, in Lydia's now familiar hand, he left me nothing but the dog and a chance. I took the chance. L. "I don't understand," I said, though I did, in that way where feelings outrun logic and you're left standing in their dust. "She withdrew her own money," Harold said. "The envelope Jace took wasn't hers. It was Bart's rent, tucked in the wrong place, by a man who hated wallets. He told me that once while we raked leaves for a woman on the block who made cookies with too much cinnamon." He smiled without showing teeth. "Do you see? You were guilty of trespass, of cowardice, of thinking you're better than your worst day. You weren't guilty of bankruptcy." Mara arrived mid-explanation, hair damp from the kind of sleet Cleveland uses as punctuation. She slid in, eyes bright. "We can fix the piece. We can add this." Harold's hand shook a little when he took his mug. "Fix it, and then let it be.
I'm tired of carrying everything to everyone. I reached into my jacket because something had been scratching at me since he'd sat down. "What's the metal in your coat?" I asked. "I kept hearing it." He smiled small. "Dog tags," he said, and slid them free. They were scratched near to illegible. "Michael Harvey. My boy. He didn't die. He only learned to call someone else Dad. That's not a tragedy. It's a math problem solved right." "Why the photographs?" Mara asked gently. "To prove the math," he said simply. The bell over the door laughed meaner than usual. Noah and Jace walked in together, which told me they've rehearsed this moment. Noah's face had a lawyer's calm. Jace looked like a man who'd learned a new definition of corner. "We're here to buy the file," Noah said before hello. "There's no file. There's a story." "Everything's a file if you fold it right," Noah said, and put an envelope on the table that smelled like money and a mistake. 10 grand to shut up. Mara laughed once, sharp. "That's adorable." Noah ignored her. "Ethan, this doesn't have to be public. We settle accounts, we go on." Harold looked at me, not them. "That's the price for peace that only buys quiet." He slid the envelope back across the table with one finger. "We're renting truth now." Noah's jaw set. "You think you're better than us because you sleep under a roof and call yourself a janitor? You think stories fix things? They don't. They make new messes." Harold stood slowly. He smelled like wool and wet paper. He tucked the bank slip and the dog tags back into his coat, and the small sound of metal on plastic made the hairs on my arms rise. "Stories don't fix," he said. "They align. People fix sometimes." He looked at me. "You coming?" I stood. Mara stood. Noah didn't. Jace looked at the floor like it was telling secrets.
"When a thing refuses to be bought, it makes some men violent. Was the next door the one we'd been avoiding since we were boys?"
Snow flurried like torn receipts in the streetlight. The house looked smaller, a diorama someone had put back in a box wrong. The porch sag had been fixed in the years between. The maple in the yard had a proper brace. A woman's wind chime knocked faintly, too cold to sing. Harold led us to the curb like a docent. He said, "We say the names where they happened." And I felt stupid for thinking closure was a living room ceremony. Mara filmed with her phone in that unshowy way she has, when the focus is not the camera, but the breath of what's happening. I smelled cold stone and damp wood, and my own fear turning to something that could stand up straight. We spoke in order. I said to the porch, "I'm sorry for stepping where I didn't belong. I'm sorry for leaving fear to grow in me like mold. I was 21 and practiced at being good without being brave." My voice came out warmer than I felt. Mara squeezed my wrist in a tiny gesture that said, "Then, now." Harold said, "I'm sorry I didn't keep my boy when keeping was work." He touched the brace of the maple like it could feel. "I'm sorry I left pictures as stand-ins for being present." A car idled at the corner. The window rolled down. Noah's face, slice of interior light, watched us like a man casing a scene. Jace was a shadow beside him. Then the window rose, the car moved on, and the night went back to being itself. A porch light across the street flicked on. Stan stepped out, sleeve hem wet. "Harold," he called, "you all right?" Harold lifted a hand. "I'm good," he said, and it sounded like truth. The snow picked up. My eyes stung. Mara pocketed her phone and exhaled like a train track cooling. She said to me, "That's your ending, not their car, this." Harold swayed. For a second I thought the wind had pushed him. Then I saw his mouth whiten around a sound that didn't come. He put a hand to the bench by the sidewalk, the one Bart must have installed once he decided listening was a hobby. "Harold," I said, stepping closer. He smelled like iron suddenly, small and real. "Old heart," he said, apologetic like he'd bumped my chair. "Happens." Mara's hand went to her phone without panic. She said, "EMS," already moving, voice clipped and calm. I wrapped Harold's scarf tighter and lowered him to the bench the way you lower a book you're not ready to finish. I counted beats under my thumb and found them, stubborn and out of order. "Stay," he said, and I swear it wasn't to his own breath, but to me. "You finish." I said, "I will."
I promise." The ambulance arrived with its necessary theater. Lights painted the maple red and blue in strokes that made me dizzy. Harold went, because that's what we do when the next room's light is already on. He squeezed my wrist once, a pulse answering a pulse, and then he let them take him away. I stood in the snow until my ears hurt, listening to the wind chime emit a single note. Mara pocketed her phone and exhaled like a train track cooling. She said to me low, "That's your ending, not their car, this." I stood in the snow until my ears hurt, listening to the wind chime emit a single note. Mara put her shoulder against mine, warmer than it had any right to be. Stan waved from his porch like a man satisfied there had been no fire tonight after all. If endings are proof we started, was this one Harold's or mine?
Harold lived. He left the hospital with a new prescription and the same coat. He came to the diner and drank coffee like he'd been practicing all along. Darla cried and pretended she'd been chopping onions. The bell over the door sounded like relief for once. Mara's story ran in print with the headline, "The Janitor of Lost Things." It carried the photo of the bench under the maple and the line, "Be kind to yourself, L." She wrote about Bart like he was a hero made of ordinary hours. She wrote about Lydia like a woman who chose her life on purpose. She wrote about me without using my last name, which somehow felt like both protection and punishment. Noah didn't sue. He moved his shop to a different street where the customers were new and the stories old. Jace sent a text that simply said, "I told him I did it and it didn't fix anything, and I'm trying anyway." I replied, "Good, good, good." At my dad's parole hearing, the room smelled like old books and acrylic polish. He wore a suit that didn't know him. I spoke. I said he had taught me not to run from the consequences of stories you wrote yourself. I said that when people tell the truth out loud, sometimes their sentences get shorter. The board didn't laugh. They stamped. My father will come home in spring to a couch he will dislike, and a son who will pour coffee like he means it. Harold gave me the plastic sleeve with Lydia's license and said, "Return it." Lydia opened her door this time with the chain off. She took the sleeve and held it like a bird. "Keep the frame," she said. "Everybody deserves a picture that forgives them for being in it." "Will you read the article?" I asked. "If it has a recipe," she said, and smiled in a way that felt like a bandage coming off. The angel at Lakeview kept crying green. Snow melted. The lake turned its shoulder a different kind of gray. My runs in the park started to feel less like fleeing and more like rehearsals for arriving. If lives are rooms full of furniture we move in the dark, somebody had switched on a lamp. I could see my shins again.
The wind off the lake smelled like a promise it might keep. Gulls heckled the water. Kids with those indestructible lungs ran in coats their parents insisted were enough. The city behind me hummed like a transformer. I thought about what Harold said. Stories align. People fix. I thought about how the photograph of July 17 in a cloudy Ziploc had pulled a dozen lives into the same circle and asked us to speak without hating ourselves for how our voices sounded. I thought about how often I've been the careful one when it was bravery that was missing all along. Mara and I walked the shore without naming us. Our hands brushed and didn't apologize. She told me she's pitching a series on everyday archivists, the people who keep the scraps because history prefers the neatness of spreadsheets. I told her I might finally replace the bulb in my hallway that flickers like a second chance. She laughed like a match lighting a room that already wanted to be warm. Behind my eyes, the diner bell found a new tone. The angel's tears looked less like a sentence and more like weather. I kept the napkin in my wallet. Be kind to yourself.
I don't always listen, but I carry it. Maybe the proof that we were there isn't the photograph. It's the work that followed, when we stopped pretending the picture was the whole story.
He didn't ask for money. He asked for a hearing. We gave it, and the past finally said something we could live with.